Hi students, it's Mrs. G. I am back with chapter 4 of A Mango Shaped Space, and it is just such a nice night that I thought we could sit out on my porch and read a book together. So that's what we're doing today, and hopefully we finish the chapter before the sun goes down or it rains. So we'll see how it goes. So anyway, chapter 4, A Mango Shaped Space. When we left off, Mia and Jenna had just completed a pick mission, which you may or may not have agreed with. So we're going to find out what happens next in chapter 4. So chapter 4, A Mango Shaped Space. Only 2 weeks into school, I've already failed 2 math quizzes. Failed with a bright purple capital F. The note from my teacher is burning a hole in my back pocket, and I know I should give it to my parents. Instead, I'm sitting at the kitchen table, forcing myself to finish the rest of my homework. Zach is actually humming as he does a 6th grade long division. Beth claims she didn't have any homework and is outside gathering herbs in the moonlight. I can't remember ever seeing Beth in the woods before. She isn't the outdoorsy type, which is pretty pathetic considering our house is surrounded by fields and woods. Mango is on my lap, purring away as I pet him. I finished reading the 3rd chapter of Lord of the Flies, which, it turns out, is not about flies at all. I can't help yawning. Reading always makes me tired because sometimes I get so caught up in the rainbow-like colors of the words that I have to read passages over and over. You really should cover your mouth when you yawn, Zach says. Why? We're not in public. He shrugs and resumes his homework. It's your soul, not mine. My soul, I ask. Since when do you know about souls? Oh, I know about souls, he says gravely. And I know that if you yawn and don't cover your mouth, your soul can jump out. I stare at him. Where did you hear that? The internet again? I stare at him. Oh, sorry, I already read that part. I stare at him. Where did you hear that? The internet again? It's common knowledge, she says. You're as strange as they come, Zach. Thanks. It isn't a compliment, I assure him. It is to me, he says. I return to the sheet of math equations in front of me. After staring at the swirls of gray for 5 full minutes, I finally throw my pencil across the room in disgust. Mango jumps off my lap and chases half-heartedly after the pencil before, lying down to wash himself. I am not a stupid person. I know I'm not. Why can't I figure out this basic math problem? Zach peers at me in surprise. Something wrong? He asks. At least that's what I think, he says. The frustration blots out everything so that all I can focus on is this weird heaviness in my chest. So at this point, Mia is feeling very frustrated, and frustration blots. So think about blots as like little spots. So the frustration blots out everything. So she has so much frustration that it's like coming in little spots and waves until everything is kind of covered with the frustration that she has. And it's giving her a weird feeling of heaviness in her chest. And just like the last chapter when Mia was talking about her anxiety and her worrying bubbling up and overflowing like a soda can that's been shaken, she now is describing her anxiety and her worry as like a heaviness. So when you hear people talk about having like weight on their shoulders or weight on their chest, it's kind of like the weight or that sensation of worry and responsibility and just feeling very overwhelmed by everything. So the frustration blots out everything so that all I can focus on is this weird heaviness in my chest. The bubbling up inside has gotten too strong. I can feel it rising to the surface. Bubble, bubble, simmer, fizz, and boom. So much for trying to be normal. That didn't last long. I push back my chair, ignore the rusty red scraping sound that reminds me of dried blood, and march into the living room. My parents are sitting together on the couch trying to decide if they should be worried about Beth's new hobby. They stop talking when they see me. Okay, deep breath. Here goes, just blurt it out. I wish Grandpa were here. He would know exactly what to do. That's something really special about grandparents, and I think Mia touched on it in another chapter where grandparents are very wise, and so they've lived a life and they've experienced a lot of things, and so they have a lot of advice to give and a lot of perspective on things. I was just thinking about that this past weekend when it was Mother's Day, thinking about how my grandmother always knew the right thing to say so that I wouldn't worry about anything, because she had wisdom and she was very wise. So it sounds like Mia is also having that same feeling herself. So she was wishing that her grandfather was here. He would know exactly what to do. I have to tell you guys something. Once the words are out, I am unable to make my lips work again. They wait for me to continue, and I almost chicken out, but the boom is still ringing in my ears. I have no choice but to remind them of the one incident in my life I'd hoped everyone had forgotten. I take another deep breath. Remember in 3rd grade when you guys had to come to the principal's office to get me? They think for a few seconds. Then my father says, something about chalk? Right, I say, chalk. At that moment, I taste the chalk in my mouth. Feel it tickling my throat. What about it? My mother asks. Well, remember I told everyone I made the whole thing up? Vaguely, she says. What's this all about, Mia? Well, the thing is, I begin, knowing there is no turning back now. I wasn't lying. Numbers really do have colors for me. So do letters and sounds. They are staring at me with that familiar, Mia sprouted another head stare, but I keep talking. I bounce around the room as I speak. Each word lightens me a bit more. I used to think everyone saw colors. Then in 3rd grade, I figured out it was just me. My mind flashes to Billy for a second, but I don't want to confuse things even more. Not until I figure out what his story is. I thought I should tell you about it before I get 2 F's on my report card. I dig into my pocket and hand my mom the crumpled note. You have to sign this. I plop down on the armchair across from them, waiting for their reaction as they read the note together. I don't have to wait too long. Is this whole story some kind of joke to justify your difficulty with math? Asked my mother with a frown. Because it wasn't funny in 3rd grade, and it isn't funny now. It isn't a joke, Mom, I reply, gritting my teeth. My father studies me for a minute. Do you mean to say you hallucinate? That means to imagine things in your head, right? Or see things in your head that aren't really there. I shake my head. It's not like that. Hallucinating means you you see things that aren't really there, my father adds. I try not to lose my patience. I know what that word means, Dad. I'm not imagining things. My colors are as real as this house. What kind of colors are these exactly? My mother asks. I can tell she's still not sure whether I am lying. I try to think of the easiest way to describe it. Each letter and number has its own color. I explain, like a K is a turquoise blue. Whether I think of it, read it, or hear it, it's just there inside my head, plain as day. They continue to stare at me and I begin to squirm. Sounds have colors too, I add, figuring there's no use holding anything back at this point. High-pitched sounds give the sharpest colors. When I hear a noise, I'll see the color and a shape to go with. Shape? My father interrupts. Yes, shape, I say. The colors appear in geometric shapes like spirals or balls or zigzags, that sort of thing, or sometimes just a hazy patch of colored air. Does this block your vision? My mother asks hurriedly. Does it hurt? I shake my head at both questions. No, it's not like that. It's really more. This is all your fault, my mother informs my father before I can finish my sentence. My fault? He jumps from the couch. How are you blaming this on me? All those drugs in the 60s, she says accusingly. What drugs? He sputters. I never took drugs in the 60s. Well, neither did I, she says. I never said you did. This conversation has taken an unexpected turn, and my head is going back and forth like a ping pong ball. So in her head, she feels like all of these thoughts are kind of going back and forth and kind of banging off in the middle of her head, and she can't keep them all straight. It's too much for her. This conversation has taken an unexpected turn, and my head is going back and forth like a ping pong ball. Your brother used drugs, she says matter-of-factly, unwilling to give up this line of reasoning. What does that have to do with me? Or Mia, he demands. Maybe you inhaled something or passed it on to her, she says, or maybe this is your crazy Aunt Polly's fault, my father responds. Maybe Mia inherited something from her. Aunt Polly isn't crazy, my mother says defensively. She's just a little eccentric. That has nothing to do with... Eccentric means kind of like a little interesting or odd or a little different. She's just a little eccentric. That's nothing to do with... I figured you'd think I'm crazy, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. They glare at each other, and then their faces both soften. We don't think you're crazy, Mia, my father says, sitting down again. We just don't understand. He reaches over and takes my hands in his. Do you remember when this started? It's always been there, I tell him, still stinging from their words. I bet I know what this is all about, my mother says excitedly. I bet those building blocks you used to play with, you know, the one with the colored letters on them? Huh, I say. You probably memorized the colored letters when you were a baby, she says, and you've been associating colors with and letters. You've been associating colors with letters and numbers ever since. Associating means kind of putting those two things together. I think about that for a second, then shake my head. That can't be it, I say. That doesn't explain. I'll run down to the basement and get them, she says, ignoring me. I'm sure they're still in the old toy chest. She's off and running before I can stop her. My father and I just look at each other. Time passes very slowly until she returns. Cradling a few dusty books in her blocks in her arms, she holds one up in front of me. It has the letter Q carved on each side in faded red. What color is this, she asks. It's red, I tell her. See, she says gleefully. I'm right. The Q is red, I repeat, on the block. But in my head, it's a dark silver, like the color of Dad's helicopter. My mother doesn't say anything. She just keeps turning the block over and over in her hand. Well, my father says after a long pause, we'll just have to go see Dr. Randolph. I'm sure he'll be able to help. Over the years, Dr. Randolph has cured kids of everything from chicken pox to broken bones. He means well, but he's getting old and a little forgetful. For the last few years, he's called me Beth. I even heard him call Zach Beth once, but Zach denies it. Dad, the last time we went to Dr. Randolph, you said he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed anymore. Never mind that, he says. We'll have to start somewhere. I'll call him right now. He goes into the kitchen and opens the cabinet with the emergency numbers posted on it. Mom is still staring at the block as if she's trying to see what I see. I know how frustrating it is to see something differently from someone else, or in my case, everyone else, and I feel sorry for her. I have to give Mango his pill, so I stand up to leave. Mom breaks her gaze away from the block and looks at me solemnly. Solemnly looks kind of like sadly and seriously. Why didn't you come to us before, she asks. She sounds hurt. My throat tightens. I tried to back in 3rd grade. No one believed me, remember? I'm glad you're telling us now, she says, reaching out to hug me. It feels good. Mom's not usually the touchy-feely type. But we do remember before, even though Mom's not the touchy-feely type, she is very good at sensing other people's emotions. We'll find out what's going on, she assures me. Don't worry. I nod and leave her holding the cue up to the light. Mango is asleep on my bed, wheezing his mango wheeze contentedly. Contentedly means to be content, which means to feel calm and content, like you don't have a worry in the world. So Mango is asleep. He is wheezing his mango wheeze, and he feels very content. So he's contentedly doing his mango breathing. He springs up as soon as I open the box of tuna-flavored cat treats. Without my colors, Mango's wheezes would just be wheezes with no comforting mango puffs. Is that worth giving up for good grades? I guess I have no choice. After all, everyone else manages just fine without seeing them. He gobbles down the treat, never suspecting a pill is hidden inside it. He is so trusting, I give him a few more treats without pills in them. And then he yawns in my face, and I wave away his icky tuna breath. That night, I go to bed early and dream that Dr. Randolph has turned Mango into a stack of dusty building blocks. Every time I pile them up, someone comes and knocks them back down. and I can never turn around fast enough to see who it is. That sounds like an ominous and scary dream. Feels like something bad is going to happen. That's what ominous means. By morning, my parents are still waiting to hear from Dr. Randolph, so they decide to send me off to school. On the bus, I randomly open up my art book to an artist I haven't seen before. I decide instantly that this is the guy for me. His name is Kandinsky, and the shapes he uses in his paintings look a lot like the ones I see when I hear noises. His images are all twisted together and overlapping like when I hear music with a lot of different instruments. The color he uses are flat. The colors he uses are flatter, more primary than the ones I usually see, but they're still pretty close. So primary colors are like red, blue, green, those very basic colors that you see. Maybe it's not green. I don't know, but they're those like very basic classic colors that you learn when you're young, not the variations like blue-green or yellow-green or saffron or magenta. They're just the very primary first colors, basic colors that you learn. So the colors he uses are flatter, more primary than the ones I usually see, but they're still pretty close. In history, we are divided into groups of 4 and told that the group will have to present a big project at the end of the marking period. It will be based on an event in American history that America would rather forget. And if you've been paying attention in history class, you'll know that there are many things in American culture and actually cultures all over the world that we would rather forget. But it's really important to make sure that you look at those things in history that we'd rather forget and learn from them and don't make those same mistakes again. Just a little tidbit to think about. Roger Carson is in my group along with Jonah Finley and Laura Hofson, who is always the first to volunteer the answer in class. Roger and I glance at each other and he quickly looks down at his desk. We are supposed to get together outside of school to decide the topic. Half of our grade will depend on this assignment, but no one seems too eager to make plans. Least of all, me. The marking period isn't over until Thanksgiving, and that seems very far away right now. During lunch, Jenna tells us about the boy-girl party she's planning for her birthday in November. Molly starts pointing at the boys she thinks should be invited when the school guidance counselor shows up at our table. "You're Mia Winchell, right?" she asks me. Surprised, I nod. Had I done something wrong? Had I put my history homework in the wrong pile? "Your mother is here," she informs me. Then she lowers her voice and says, "You have an appointment with your doctor." I gather my books while the guidance counselor waits. "It's nothing," I assure my friends. "I'll see you later." My mother is waiting on the front steps of the school, and she tells me Dr. Randolph has agreed to see me right away. For some reason, Beth's on the front seat of the car. It's in the front seat of the car, her newly red hair glowing unnaturally in the sunlight. What's she doing here?" I ask. "She has poison ivy all over her arms and legs," my mother informs me, holding open the back door. "Be nice." I slide in and lean forward, noting that Beth has tube socks on both her arms. "So how'd the herb picking go, Beth?" "Shut up. Can you just cast a spell and make the poison ivy go away?" I ask. "Mom," Beth says. "Mia," my mother warns. I lean back in my seat. "Sorry." "Do you think Mia's really sorry?" I don't know. I was a sister once, so I would say probably not. Beth looks at me over her shoulder. "Why are you going to Dr. Randolph anyway? You don't look sick." I don't know what to say. Luckily, Mom jumps in and says, "I just need a checkup." Beth doesn't seem convinced, but she drops it and starts scratching the back of her hand through the socks. Mom tells her to stop or she'll get scars. That stops her instantly. Dr. Randolph's waiting room reminds me of the vets, except with kids instead of animals. A group of toddlers play with toy trains and Legos while a baby hollers in his mother's arms. I cover my ears to soften the shrill screams, but it doesn't stop the silver spears from shooting across the room. I wish everyone else could see them. At least here I'm not the only one covering my ears. I'm dreading going in there and having to explain everything again. The three of us sit as far away from the chaos as possible. Beth has started scratching again. I make sure I don't get too close. How do you still bring us to a baby doctor? Beth asked our mother. I am wondering the same thing. Mom frowns. Dr. Randolph is a pediatrician, she says. That means he sees children of all ages, including 16-year-olds and 13-year-olds. Beth is finally called in, and my mother starts to get up with her. That's okay, Beth tells her. I can do this on my own. My mother sits back down with a sigh. By the way, Mia, I spoke to your math teacher this morning. I try to ignore the toddler pawing at my sneaker. You did? What did she say? She doesn't understand why you're having so much trouble since you do so well in most of your other classes. She says that if you don't improve, you'll have to go to summer school next year. You're kidding me. I wish I were. What am I going to do? I asked. Nothing could be worse than summer school. We'll figure something out, she promises. I'll go over your homework with you. I don't have the heart to tell her it's not going to help. I know what I'm supposed to do to solve the equations. Somehow, I just managed to get all mixed up in the middle. 10 minutes later, Beth returns, covered in pink lotion, clutching a prescription. She doesn't look happy. The nurse pokes her head out of the door and motions me in. Motions means like this, like, come on. So imagine that in your head. The nurse, maybe you don't have to imagine it because you've seen it at your doctor's. I wait for my mother to join me. There's no way I'm going in there alone. Dr. Randolph meets us in the examination room. I hop up on the table and wait for him to cure me. He's always done it before. He finishes flipping through my file and then turns to me. Hi, Mia, he says, smiling his friendly neighborhood doctor smile. How are we today? I look at my mother and she gestures for me to answer. This. Come on, it's your turn. I'm fine, I tell him, relieved he remembered my name. Your father told me what's been going on with you, he says, and I have to admit it has me puzzled. My shoulders drop and my mother's face falls a little. So her shoulders are dropping, so she's kind of like, kind of feeling exasperated, maybe a little defeated, and her mom's face falls a little. So that means kind of like, so that feeling of kind of worry and sadness and, what do you mean it puzzles you? You're a doctor. You're supposed to know everything. So I think her mom was hoping for some relief, and she wasn't really getting it from what the doctor's saying so far. So my shoulders drop and my mother's face falls a little. And the doctor says, but I'll do my darndest to figure it out, he says, and I allow myself a small surge of hope. A surge is kind of like a rush of something, so like a surge of electricity. So the doctor tells her that, and she has like a little bit of hope that is coming from that. He proceeds to give me a regular exam, checking my ears, eyes, throat, and reflexes. He listens to my lungs and heart with a cold stethoscope and even tickles my feet to see if I feel it. I do. Then he asks if I've started menstruating yet. I feel my face start to burn. I don't see what that has to do with anything. No, I reply, looking away. I think many girls in my class have had their periods already. But as far as I'm concerned, there's no rush to cross this threshold into womanhood. Sure hasn't made Beth any nicer. After that day in 5th grade, when the boys were sent out of the room to play kickball and the girls had to learn about becoming a woman, Jenna and I swore we'd never talk about it. So far, so good. Dr. Randolph makes some notes in his file and scratches his head. Then he weighs me, measures my height, and he has to bend over so we can see if my spine is straight. I keep glancing at my mother, but she is wearing her just be patient face. I bet everyone's mom has a just be patient face, but you've all seen it. You've all seen your mom make that just be patient face, get it together face. Suddenly he opens the door and slams it. My mother and I both jump. Dr. Randolph turns to me. So, he says, what did you see? It takes a few seconds to realize this is a test. I saw brown rings, I tell him. Where, he asks. About 3 feet away from me, in the air. Just hanging there in space, he asks. Did I sense an edge of disbelief creeping into his voice? Just hanging there, I say. Are they still there, he asks. His eyes flicker toward my mother. No, I tell him. The colors and shapes only last about 2 seconds unless the noise keeps going. What color is the word doctor, he asks. I answer without hesitation. It's mostly hot pinkish purple because that's the color of the D, but the colors of the other letters add a gold tinge to it. Oh, and it's also kind of grainy. Anything else, he asks wearily. I think for a minute. Nope, that's all. I cross my arms and wait for the next question. Instead, he motions for my mother to step out in the hall with him. I wonder if I failed the test somehow. A minute later, they're back. Well, Beth, Dr. Randolph begins. I think it will be best if... Mia, I correct him, ignoring my mother's glare. What? He asks. My name, I say clearly. It's Mia. Of course it is, he says defensively. Now, as I was just telling your mother, I think it would be best if we send you to a psychotherapist. I've given your mother the name of a young woman who I'm sure will be able to help you. With that, he ushers us out the door and back down the hall. My head hangs low. I feel deflated, as though the air is slowly leaking out of me. So he thinks I'm crazy too, I say to my mother as we rejoin the fray in the waiting room. No, he doesn't, she says softly so Beth won't hear. He's just trying to help. Beth hops up when she sees us. The lotion flakes off her as we walk to the car. If I didn't feel so sorry for myself, I would feel pretty bad for her. If Dr. Randolph doesn't think I'm crazy, then why is he sending me to a psychotherapist? I ask my mother as we walk into the entrance of the school together. I watch television. I know what therapists do. Dr. Randolph only wants you to get better. He believes this is the next step. He called me Beth again, I remind her. It could have been worse, she says, turning to go. He could have called you Zach. At that point, I would rather have been called anything but crazy. It is one thing for me to call myself crazy. It is another thing entirely when a doctor does it. I pull open the heavy right door as the bell rings at the end of sixth period. I blend in with the throng and make my way to gym class. Running around the track always makes me feel better. I quickly change into my gym clothes and I'm the first one out in the field. I may be crazy, but at least I can run fast. The other kids eventually file out and the tracks fill up. As I pass Roger on the track, I decide he must have outgrown his 2 different socks phase. Just as I make this observation, he trips and lands hard on his side. Two kids help him off the field, and he hobbles back inside. After I change into my regular clothes, I find him sitting on the bleachers with an ice pack on his left ankle. Are you okay, I ask? He looks up and grimaces a little. Grimaces like a face, maybe like you're in pain a little bit, like wincing. I twisted my ankle pretty bad. I could have sprained it. If you wanted to get out of gym class, there are easier ways. He smiles, and I think he must have gotten his braces off recently because his teeth look very straight. We need to get together about the history project, he says, steadying the ice pack, which had begun to slip. I'll give you my number and we can make plans over the phone. With his free hand, he reaches into his book bag and hunts for a pencil. I notice he has a paperback copy of one of the Narnia books. Have you read that yet? I ask him as he pulls out the book and leans on it to write his phone number. At least 10 times, he says, handing me the piece of scrap paper with his number on it. They're my favorite books. Have you read them? I've only read the first one, I tell him. I'm not too big on reading. A brief look of disappointment flickers across his face. For some reason, I feel like I need to explain. Reading is hard for me, that's all. It's not that I don't like it. Oh, Roger says, clearly unsure of what else to say. The bell rings and startles both of us. Call me tonight about the project, okay? I nod as I hurry out of the gym. I don't picture myself calling him anytime soon. Jenna tries very hard not to cry on the bus after school. She talks about the weather, how it should be cooling off a bit. She tells me her gym teacher made the girls cheers for the boys in volleyball and that she's going to file a complaint. When the driver lets us out at our stop, she can't hold it anymore. I know you'd tell me if something was wrong, she says, because best friends tell each other everything, right? Can we talk about it later, I ask. It's kind of a long story, and I just need to start my art project. Just tell me one thing. Are you sick? No, I'm not sick. Am I? I promise I'll tell you everything later. Later, like when, she asks. This weekend, I hear myself saying. Okay, she says reluctantly. Reluctantly means that you're kind of like hesitating to do something. you're not really sure if you want to do it. So I'm guessing that maybe Jenna is feeling really excited, or not excited, but interested or anxious to hear what Mia's going to say. So she's kind of reluctantly agreeing to give Mia her space, as we say these days. So, okay, she says reluctantly, but I'm going to hold you to it. I know, I say, wondering if there's any chance she'll forget. Not likely. When I get home, I close myself in my room and set up my easel. As if on cue, my father starts hammering. If I'm going to imitate Kandinsky, I'm going to have to bring on the shapes. I turn on the radio to a heavy rock station and also put in a cassette of a thunderstorm. The shapes come, unbidden as always, and I begin to paint. It's a good thing this assignment was given early in the year. After all, my colors and shape may not be around much longer if I can actually find a doctor to cure me. I should record them for posterity. A word I only recently learned means the people who come in after you in history, not your rear end, which is your posterior. I concentrate hard and paint fast to keep up with the fleeting images. As soon as I try to capture one in my head, it's gone and morphed into another shape. After an hour, I stand back and admire my progress. It actually looks a lot like Kandinsky's work, but I bet he didn't get a headache from all the noise. I paint and paint until I fill up almost every available space on the canvas. When I turn off the music, the resulting quiet is a big relief. I lie down on the bed and let the silence seep into me like a cool breeze. So the silence, like a cool breeze, think about a cool breeze on a hot day. You're so hot and you just need some relief. And so that cool breeze comes in and makes you feel better. And so for Mia, that when she's listening to music, it might feel very overwhelming to her because she's getting this kind of seeing all these things in her mind's eye, and it's kind of overwhelming to her brain. So having that quiet is really helpful to her. Saturday afternoon rolls around all too quickly, and Jenna waits impatiently for me to start talking. The gray sky looks slightly threatening. I keep glancing up as we find our favorite log at the end of the woods. I run my finger over the words, Mia and Jenna's log, keep away, which we carved into the soft bark a few summers ago using my father's pocket knife. One of our first pick missions, partner in crime missions, was snagging the knife from his tool shed and then returning it undiscovered. Tisk tisk, not safe. Jenna swings her legs back and forth, side to side, wordlessly willing me to speak. I had hoped to be able to tell her I'd been cured so I wouldn't have to go into the details, but I still haven't seen the therapist. Apparently a lot of other people in town have mental problems because I can't get an appointment until Monday. That's actually pretty funny because it's not that other people have mental problems, it's just that there's nothing wrong with going to see a therapist if you're feeling worried about something. So the good thing is it sounds like a lot of other people in town are going to see therapists to talk about things that are bothering them. So that's a good thing, right? I watch ants file neatly into the anthole by my feet and remind myself that Jenna and I have known each other forever. She is closer to me than my own sister. Much closer, actually. I open my mouth and force myself to start talking. Breathlessly, I tell her about seeing colors and how I thought everybody saw things that way, and then I found out nobody did, and I felt so alone and strange. I tell her I wasn't lying that day I got sent home in 3rd grade. She's not saying anything, so I ramble on, my hands flying around in the air. I've always wanted to tell you that your first name is the color and texture of wet grass, and your last name is a purplish pink and white, like a peppermint candy. Grass and peppermint, isn't that nice? I say as I realize how cool Jenna is. I wondered that I could have been afraid to tell her all these years. I wait for her response. When it comes, it almost knocks me off the log. She bursts out crying. Jenna, I say with my eyes opening wide. What's wrong? She turns her face and wipes her eyes with the back of her hands. I can see the tears are sliding down her cheeks. She sniffles and wipes again. I feel totally helpless. Finally, she faces me again. I can't believe you hid this from me all these years, she says with an unfamiliar hardness in her voice. I've shared everything with you. Everything. Why didn't you tell me? Shocked by her reaction, my words flew out strangely. But nobody knows. I kept it from everybody. I got used to keeping it to myself. Please don't take it personally. I'm practically begging her now. She stands up. How can I not? I thought you were my best friend. I am, I say, jumping up from the log. And you're mine. We're partners in crime. My eyes fill with tears. This hasn't gone at all as I expected. My head is reeling. Reeling is, think about like a reel, like going around and around and around, and she can't really keep her thoughts straight because she's kind of so shocked by Jenna's reaction that she can't really get a hand. She can't catch up with it or hold on to it. Maybe you don't know what a best friend is. She steps away from me. My jaw falls open. Maybe you don't. I thought if anyone would understand, it would be you. Well, I don't understand, she says angrily. I don't understand why you didn't tell me in 3rd grade, or 4th grade, or 7th. It's always been you and me against the world. I'll bet there's lots of things you don't bother to tell me. There aren't, I insist. Jenna and I had never fought before, ever. I can feel my hands start to shake. And think about a time that maybe you're worried and your hands start to shake. And think about that time and think about how upset Mia is. I have to go home, Jenna says suddenly. She hurries along the path back to our houses. I run to the edge of the woods and wait for her to look back, but she doesn't. I'm so shocked, I don't know what to feel. As I walk home, I decide on anger. By the next morning, I change my mind and choose disappointment. And after school on Monday, after Jenna had ignored me all day, I decide on very, very hurt. That is the end of chapter 4. And I think that's really interesting because, think about a time that you've been in an argument with someone, and kind of at the beginning of that argument or right immediately after that argument, you feel really angry. And then later on, you might have that feeling like disappointed that happened. And then maybe the next day you might feel hurt that someone treated you that way and that you weren't seeing eye to eye and that was their reaction. So that's kind of that's kind of an interesting thought about the evolution. That means like how your feelings change or evolve, the evolution of your feelings after you have an unpleasant experience with someone. And I think you can think about a time that you've had an unpleasant experience with someone in your life. It could be your mom or your dad or your siblings, but certainly at your age in middle school, you might have a lot of these experiences like Jenna and Mia that you kind of don't see eye to eye with your friends. So try to think about that and draw from that experience, and that might kind of help you imagine or empathize with how Mia is feeling, and maybe even how Jenna's feeling in that situation. You may have been on either side of that situation before. So, okay, cool. So, all right. So let's talk about some questions that we might want to discuss with the story that you guys are going to tell me about. So, when Mia's parents finally believe, So I want you guys to kind of think a little bit about how Mia is feeling right now with, her situation, because she's finally decided to be vulnerable to people and tell them her biggest secret, because she was feeling a little desperate, I think, because she wasn't doing well in math. And so her parents bring her to a doctor to be cured. I want you to think about, if you had Mia's superpower, how you would feel about that. Would you want to be cured of it, or would you want to continue to have that superpower? And the other thing is, I want you to think about a time that maybe you were having a hard time getting along with someone. It could be your mom or your dad, or a sibling, or a cousin, or a friend. And, you don't have to give me the specifics of it, but maybe talk about the way that it made you feel and how your feelings would have changed over time. and how you think Mia should go about trying to work things out with her very best friend. So thank you so much for spending, I guess a little bit more than a half hour, 40 minutes, joining me on my front porch and reading this book with me. It was really fun. Hopefully the weather will continue to be nice, and we'll be able to have more porch reading. I think it's a great place to read. So I'll be thinking about all of you, and I miss you all so much, and I'm so excited to hear about your thoughts of the book. So thanks so much, and have a great weekend. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Bye.